Well, Bradley, I want to thank you for taking the time to come this morning. Listen, we just got through discussing how we met, and it was years ago, probably first through the ACCJ, and then later through ASIJ parents we know, and my sons being at YS, two of my sons being there. Well, let's start off with Bradley. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in a small town in Iowa. Literally the back of nowhere. It was really, they called it a village. The county has specifically and maybe purposefully decided that they were not incorporating their towns, and so I'm from a village called Farmington, Iowa.
Do you know how many people were there?
At the time, 650.
It is a village. What do you mean? That can't be considered a town. So, I mean, I had more people in my junior high school. 650.
650. Yeah.
So everyone knew everyone.
Oh, yeah, we knew the neighbors' dogs.
Right. So, I mean, were there a lot of families related?
Not in our case, but yeah, there were plenty of families. If you could say the such and such family, and you knew 12 or 15 people who were all had that name, but not in our case.
Did you grow up there until when?
I was there until I was 17 and went to college.
Had you traveled outside of Iowa prior to that?
Well, not really. I mean, we had relatives in the Chicago area, in Lake County.
That was the closest big city?
The closest big city is St. Louis.
St. Louis, okay.
But we didn't really have much to take us there, except my dad was a big Cardinals fan, and so we would go down about once a year to see a Cardinals game. But that was a big treat, and you know, so back then there weren't as good of roads, so it took 5-6 hours, you know, to get there. So it was a big deal.
Okay. You don't mind saying what years this is?
No, I don't. I was born in '66.
Okay.
So when we were going back and forth to ball games, it would have been the '70s.
Right.
And I would have gone to college in '84.
84. So,
yeah.
do you have siblings?
I have 2 brothers.
Okay. Older or younger?
One older, one younger. I'm the middle.
Okay. How many years between you and the oldest?
3 years between my older brother Brian and myself, and just 1 between my younger brother.
So you're really close with your younger brother?
Oh yeah. He actually joined me in Japan for about a decade.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you close with your older brother?
We are close. We're good friends, but he is still in the Midwest, and I've spent all of my adult life in Japan.
Okay.
And so we don't get to see each other that often, maybe 4 or 5 times a year.
Okay. What about mom and dad? How are they doing?
Well, my dad just passed this past year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He unfortunately had Parkinson's, and he died at 90, and so from about 80.
But he had a good. That's good.
Oh yeah, it was a good.
I mean,
run.
how long did he have Parkinson's?
Well, we knew about it for 5 years. So from about 85 to 90, it was a slow progression. The last 2 years were very difficult, and in the last year, I had to go back and take my dad to a nursing home and convince my mother, not to, be too upset about it. She could still drive there and see him. We'd got him a place close by, but she just couldn't do it anymore,
Right. How old is your mom?
She's much younger. She's 12 years younger than my dad.
Okay.
So she's just 78 this year. And unfortunately, because of all this stuff that she was doing, focusing my dad, she didn't take care of her health. And so we've been spending the last year, I've been going every month practically, and we've been getting her eyes redone, knee redone, she's turning into the bionic woman.
Isn't that something? And isn't it nice that we live in a time where that can be done?
Oh yeah.
And is she living alone? Or
she is living alone.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
See, and that's another good thing.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't even imagine anyone doing this when we were young.
My older brother has offered numerous times to put her up in one of his extra houses near him, and she just won't do it. But part of it's pride, I suppose, but part of it is people don't really need to do that anymore until much later in age for most people.
Because we have video chatting, you can see, you can put cameras up so you can see what's going on if she allows it. At least outside of the house.
We've got her on Messenger on the iPad.
Right, and she can handle all that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
well.
good. That's good.
Yeah.
So, what was it like for you growing up? With you have two brothers.
Two brothers.
You know, your older brother. I'm trying to imagine that because he's 3 years older than you, so that's still kind of close.
Yeah, yeah.
Enough for you to be.
Well, so my older brother was kind of like a little mini hero for me, when I was a kid, because of course he was just old enough to feel like he was old when you're growing up, and he, like your kids, was super athletic and sporty, and I never was. I was always bookish, and
so you were more of an academic than
totally.
you were.
Yeah.
So all the way through school.
Yeah, for me, my whole life was study and politics, and that was it.
Now, what do you think started that? Just because?
Well, I think all three of us are entirely different.
Okay.
And we come from exactly the same parents. So there's
Do you
something
look alike?
about
Do you
that.
guys look alike?
We
too?
look similar to one another.
Who do you look more like?
Well, I look very much like my dad now as I get older. When I was young, everyone thought I looked like my mother.
Okay.
And they would make jokes about the fact that I was from the milkman because the other two looked just like my dad. But as I get older, I seem to be aging into his lines, and of course I have his hair, and so yeah, I've moved from kind of on my mother's end of the spectrum to my father's end of the spectrum, and that's been an interesting transition actually, because I think my father he was very sporty, although he was a teacher.
What type of teacher?
He was trained to be a zoology, biology teacher.
Okay.
But he taught our entire growing up as an English teacher.
Wait. So, because your town was your village was very small.
Yeah.
So, did you have one teacher all the way through elementary school? Was that the way you guys did it?
Well, my father was a middle school teacher, so yeah, we had one teacher for each class. There was only enough kids for one class, basically,
right, okay.
or one grade level, So we had one teacher for each grade level.
Oh, a different teacher.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't like an old one-room school.
Because sometimes they have one teacher takes you all the way through.
They do have that,
right.
But not where we were. And so we had 3 or 4 communities around us were sending all their kids together.
So you only had one school for your village?
Yeah, well,
your town.
School for half of our county. And there were, I don't know, 5, 6 towns back then that sent their kids to this school.
Okay.
And the other half of the county had another school. And then there was actually a third school years and years ago. But they consolidated. And now my school's gone. And the only school that remains in our county is Van Buren County High School. And
how many people in your county?
8,000.
It's from the 6 to 8,000 now.
Yeah, so it's 8,000 in the whole
But what about
county.
where you came from?
Yeah.
8,000.
8,000 in the whole county.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe a third of those are Amish and Mennonite.
That's what I was thinking.
They don't send their kids to the school. So.
Right, they train them themselves.
Yeah,
right.
so the pool of kids that are going to school is very small.
Wow. Because they have most of the kids too, don't they?
Oh, sure.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
They need them because they build and they do everything.
Yeah.
They make all the furniture and the homes and
exactly.
barns and.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So you grew up around that. Did you ever have any Amish friends?
Well, not
You
friends
couldn't.
really,
You
but of course we've always known Amish families.
Okay.
When we had an apple orchard as well. So my dad was a teacher. My mom was a social worker. She worked with elderly folks who did like Meals on Wheels programs, that kind of thing. And my father was very handy, and so he quite regularly would go and help out some Amish folks who were working on somebody's house or this kind of thing.
Really?
And at one point we built our own house. And when we built our own house, then they, of course, Otagaini came in and helped out as well.
You didn't help? You weren't involved?
Oh, of course. When we built our house, I was.
I thought so. Yeah. So what were you doing mostly?
I did the electricity, primarily.
You wired the house?
I wired the house.
How old were you when you built this house?
12 or 13.
Okay.
Something like that.
So you didn't learn basic wiring by that time?
Yeah. Wiring is actually pretty simple as long as you don't have. Well, nowadays it's very fancy because they have all these, digital.
But it still isn't. It's still easy. It's still not difficult.
But it was very straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
and the difficult parts were when you had to wire 220, or if you were putting in some kind of 3-way switch.
Right.
And then you just got to make sure you follow the diagram.
Right. Right. You don't cross those wires at all.
Yeah, just do that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So as a kid, you said that you were more academically inclined.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you growing up through elementary school first?
Well, it was fine. You know, because it's a small town, everybody knows everybody. And I had my older brother there to beat anybody up who was going to get in my way, right?
Okay.
So,
Right.
so I was treated well. We didn't have those kinds of, what do you call it, ijime.
Right, you didn't have ijime and you didn't have cliques because everybody knew each other.
Yeah.
So you were just one happy team.
Yeah.
But you knew the kids, no matter what they were like or what disabilities they may have, that seemed normal to you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there was a guy I just got an invitation on Facebook from yesterday, in fact, who has changed his name, and I'm not really sure what the reason for that was. But when I didn't recognize the name, I opened up and I saw his face, and I knew immediately who he was. His name was Todd when we were kids, and he had some kind of physical deformity at birth that caused him to not be able to use one hand and one leg properly. And he was 2 years younger than me, I want to say, and his brother was in my class, and he was, not, and had no disability. And they were on our side of the highway. And so because they were on our side of the highway, it meant we could play with them when we were kids.
Got you.
We couldn't cross the highway.
Right.
And so we were friends from the time we were, little kids, and never thought about it. It wasn't a thing.
Just the way it was.
Yeah,
That's just the way it was.
It was just the way it was.
I think back to how divided we've become in so many different ways.
Yeah.
To try to become the I instead of the we. And how I grew up, it was just we.
Yeah.
And I remember Nicky, who he had one leg shorter than the other, and another kid that had a hair lip.
Yeah.
Billy, and it wasn't. That's just who they were.
Yeah, of course.
You didn't think good or bad about it. That's just the way they were.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it meant that there were certain, like, positions, for example, like we'd play football or whatever, and there were certain things he wouldn't be able to do, but he just played a different role.
Right. But he did play.
Of course.
He had to.
Of course. Yeah.
Something.
What's he going to do? Sit on the sidelines?
Right. So your little brother, your younger brother, being just a year younger than you, how was it with you and him?
Well, we are still very close, and we see each other all the time. We vacation together. We do stuff together all the time. He spent 10 years here in Japan, and worked for Robert Simon, actually. Anyway, he's living in Thailand, and he's married to a guy from Thailand, and so we go and see them pretty regularly. We're going to be going there for the new year as well.
Now you said he's married to a guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what about yourself?
My wife is Japanese.
Okay. And your older brother?
He's married to a local girl.
Okay. So both you two decide. You guys, both you and your older brother. Do you have kids?
We don't have any kids. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about your older brother?
He has 3 kids, also 3 boys, and the oldest 2 of those already have 7 kids between them, and so my brother has 7 grandchildren.
They're still in Iowa.
Well, they're actually in Illinois, across the river, but yeah,
Okay,
they're very
there.
nearby. Yeah.
7 kids.
Yeah. They moved to a town that has a real economy, so they moved to a place called Quincy, Illinois, which isn't far from Hannibal, Missouri. Do you know Tom Sawyer?
Yes.
It's the same. It's exactly the same kind of environment. It's a river town, heavily Catholic. They're Catholic now.
But where were you raised?
Baptist.
Baptist? Okay.
Yeah, Baptist.
But I mean, were you the Baptist that were really
Very
verbalized?
serious.
I mean,
No,
were you quiet Baptist?
Quiet
really
Baptist,
quiet
yeah.
Baptist.
Yeah.
Did it really quietly.
Yeah, I don't know. So I studied religion as part of my undergraduate studies, and so there were Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists, and there's some history about why there is a difference, right?
Real quick, what's the history?
The Southern Baptists were slave owners,
That's right.
and Northern Baptists were anti-slavery abolitionists.
Okay.
And
That's right.
and then the Northern Baptists started splitting into smaller and smaller groupings, and our particular group is a very narrow, very traditional, stuck in the 19 whatever you want to call it 40s, let's say, There's no smoking, drinking, dancing, playing cards. None of that. Yeah. So there's no shouting in church.
No banjos, no guitars, no pianos, none of that.
Well, they do
They
pianos.
do the piano,
They
yeah,
do
but
do
it's nice, and
pianos.
I know, yes, right, they do have
Although
piano, right,
the
but no
college
tambourines.
No. The college I went to was a Disciples of Christ heritage school, and that's a split between the United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, and what used to be called the Church of Christ. And the Church of Christ was non-instrumental.
It was?
Yeah. So I went to church for 2 years at a church during college years where they didn't play music. They only sang, all a cappella.
All a cappella.
All a cappella. It was beautiful, actually.
Okay. Well, they had probably some good singers.
Well,
At least
when
they
you
picked them
start
out.
this young learning parts,
That's, I guess it would.
then
You start to develop. Somebody has a little vibrato in their voice. And
yeah,
it
exactly.
starts to happen.
Yeah. So
That's beautiful.
that was beautiful. Although I don't believe anything that they believe on social matters and so on, but that was a lovely group to be with for a while.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that played into my interest in things like coming to a place like Japan.
Okay, so going through school, you weren't very physical.
Oh no.
But you had to get involved in some of the games. There's
Well,
no way in the world you could be there.
I played basketball
Okay.
and basically got to practice. I didn't get to play. And
you didn't care.
Well, no, I didn't care. And literally on game nights, I didn't even suit up. I sat at the stats table and took the stats.
And we're just as happy as a pea in the pod.
Yeah. And I did that for baseball because my brother started varsity baseball when he was in 8th grade. He was a very serious baseball player.
Okay.
And so I started doing stats for baseball back then because that allowed me to be connected with my brother, my older brother.
Right. Was your dad really involved with you guys growing up?
Yeah, well, my dad was always very busy, but yes, he's a teacher, so he has our hours.
But he was at your
right?
school, right?
Yeah. So he had
So
our
did you
hours.
see him every day?
Of course.
So he
couldn't avoid him.
I mean, right. So I mean, he knew no matter what happened, he knew what was going on. But
Oh, yeah.
as all the other kids' parents would too.
Oh yeah, it's a small town, so
I
everybody
was
knows
thinking
everything.
everyone knows everything,
Yeah.
yeah.
The good thing about being in a small town like that, this happened to be the town my dad was raised in. So we were coming back from the Lake County, from Chicago area, to my dad's hometown.
Your mother?
My mother came from another small town, even smaller, 250 people, more toward the middle of Iowa on the very southern border, a place called Cincinnati, Iowa. But he taught her, actually. It's kind of a long story.
But they never married. But had he been married before? Had he been married before?
Oh, no.
Okay, so your mother is his only wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They were married for, I think this year they missed celebrating their 60th year.
Oh my goodness.
By just months. Yeah.
Months.
Yeah.
My
By
goodness.
months. But my mother was one of my father's students.
Okay.
And in this tiny little town, and the superintendent, my mother came from 2 generations of only women in the family, and so the superintendent was very intent on seeing my mom be with somebody who he thought would be stable and all of that.
Why
And,
was he so intent on doing that?
there was only 250 people in town. The school was tiny, so
But who was he to her?
No, just watched out for it. Felt.
What about her mother and father?
Well, she didn't have a father, and her mother didn't have a father, so that's why it's 2 generations of women only in the family.
Wait, how could they not have? What happened?
Well, in the first case, in the 1880s,
Okay.
my great-grandmother, was apparently a free thinker, and
Okay. That's enough said.
Yeah, and so she
Okay.
moved. She had 3 marriages at various points, and my grandmother followed her around. She has one half sibling.
Okay.
She had one half sibling. They're both dead now, and she did not have a stable environment. And so when she got married the first time, I want to say she was 16 or 17, which back then was kind of normal.
Sure.
She had a nervous breakdown right after the wedding, and the guy had it annulled. And she then started living with her mother again. And it turned out, we now know that she was bipolar.
Okay.
And so when she was up, she would meet somebody and have a relationship, and then when she was down, people would pitch her. And so at some point during the war, she was working at a munitions factory, and she met a guy, and he was married, and she ended up pregnant with my mother.
Okay.
And in those days, when you were pregnant with a child that you didn't have a husband, they would send you off to a home to have the baby, then they put it up for adoption, etc. And so my grandmother was sent to this home in Des Moines to have this baby, and when she had the baby, she was up, and she decided she was keeping that baby. So she told the nuns or whoever was responsible, that she was keeping it. She wasn't going to let it for adoption. That was my mother, and my mother moved in with her grandmother and her mother back in the same house that
must have been interesting for your mother to grow up like that, though.
Yeah. It was like the images that people think of as like this sort of sharecroppery, like there was no paint on the outside of the house.
I understand.
Porch in front with a couple of rockers, and out back an outhouse. Pump outside to bring water in. That was what my mom grew up at.
Grew up in that.
Yeah.
Wow. So your father was introduced to her. So like he had an omiai.
Almost.
You're right.
Yeah, American style omiai, I guess.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So they said, if you're interested, you should. That would be okay, and so he took her to prom.
So she was just 17, or when you took her to prom?
Yeah, 17.
Right.
Yeah.
And
maybe she was even 16. I don't know.
And he married her when she was how old?
17.
17. Okay.
Yeah, and
he was in his 30s.
He was maybe 29.
29. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. He was 29.
But that's not a big distance.
Yeah.
Women are much more mature than men anyway.
Yeah.
We know that.
That's what they say.
Yeah. And I won't say on camera, but I've told my sons, I think it's better, the younger their wives are, the easier time, especially if they're financially stable, it will be. If that's out the way, and they have a younger wife, she won't even try to compete with you.
Yeah.
She's the same age. I think it could be a little bit of an issue.
Yeah. Well, in the case of my parents, I think my mom was happy for the stability. She was happy to have a warm place in the wintertime.
And it was stable.
Yeah, exactly. It was stable for sure. And my dad's a very thoughtful, very caring. He's so civil. He's just one of these people that's, really like think Jerry Ford, or it's like that's my father.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've heard before in Japan they say that teachers don't necessarily make good parents. I'm completely opposed to that because I'm a teacher. I think that after you work with other people's kids, you know more than most parents will ever know.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they think, particularly the women, they think that through some sort of phenomena, once they give birth, they're going to be endowed with all this information on how to raise those kids.
Yeah.
And they don't have a clue.
Yeah.
They do, minus what their parents did to them they didn't like, they do exactly what their parents did.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that's the way you raise a child.
Yeah.
And society's changing constantly.
Yeah.
You need a PhD in human education to work with kids today.
Yeah.
Because they're coming up questioning things that weren't even considered.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned when we walked in that
Right.
we both know Tom McNamara. Tom wrote a book. Tom is a PhD. And
are you still in contact with him?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I would like to contact him. Are you on Facebook with him by any chance?
Not Facebook. I'm not a big social media person.
I am.
Yeah, but
Right.
but I do stay in contact with him. Yeah, mostly through email. But Tom wrote a book, the thesis of which was that normal people raised as normal people, are not prepared to be parents.
Thank you.
And he put together a whole hypothesis on the way that our brains are formed, and also using evolution and how the stem was the basis of the lizard and blah blah blah. And ultimately he says we're programmed to protect, but we're not programmed to really raise anybody up. And so you need to have people who are trained for that purpose. And then his solution was essentially to create a kind of very early universal daycare to bring all of these kids through a system where they are properly engaged, basically. Right. How do you know that your child is going to want to do tactile things as opposed to cerebral things, as opposed to,
That's right, or even think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're busy trying to make them use their right hand.
Yeah, exactly. I'm left-handed.
But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that was a taboo.
Oh, for sure.
That used to be a taboo. No, you're going to use your right hand.
Yeah,
I don't care how many.
My dad, being a baseball player himself, he was so excited when it turned out I was left-handed.
Because he knew that would trip everybody up.
Yeah, but then it turns out I couldn't throw a ball left-handed anyway. It didn't matter.
So when you finished high school, you took care of the stats, and you didn't even put on a uniform when you came out?
I wrestled one season. I was, I don't know, not even 90 pounds or something. And so I could wrestle the lowest weight class, but I was tall.
Oh, okay.
Compared to the other kids who weighed the same thing.
Right.
And it's Iowa, and wrestling is a big deal in Iowa. So I decided I would wrestle because the coach came and said, "Wouldn't you please wrestle?" And so I said, "Okay, sure, I'll do that." So wrestled one year, I did really, really well. And then the next year, I gained, and I was like 110 pounds. Just boom. And it wasn't muscle, it was just growing.
Right.
And so he came back to me and he said, "Okay, great, we're going to get you in the 103 weight class." And I was like, I am not losing any weight. I have spent my whole life being small. I want to be big. There's a picture of me with the basketball team where I'm holding the basketball, and the basketball is wider than you are. And this is high school. And so I said, I am not going to lose any weight. So that was the end of my wrestling career. I said, I'm done. I'm not doing that.
I'm doing that. Wow.
I remember being so excited when I hit 110 because that meant that I could give blood.
You had to be 110 to give blood?
You had to be 110 to give blood. And I always wanted to give blood. And so I was 110. I could go give blood. I gave blood, got up off the gurney, and passed out.
Did you really?
Yeah.
They were there.
There's a reason. Yeah,
right.
There's a reason why I don't have people give blood when they're small like that.
So in high school, what were your subjects that you were really focused on? Because you have to start thinking serious now, and you're in a small town, so you had to start thinking, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, our school didn't have much variety, so I just took whatever the top classes at each grade level.
Which were?
Well, in high school, the physics, you couldn't even take calculus. It didn't exist. But I had a really great maths teacher, and she came out for 5-6 of us and set up a special pre-calculus class that we did after school so that we could, test well to go into college. But yeah, chemistry, physics, and what they called advanced math were as far as it went in our school. So
did you have languages at all in your school?
I took Spanish for 2 years. Okay. I'm not sure I learned much, but I took it. You needed to if you wanted to go to college at the time. Right. Not so much anymore, but back then it was a requirement. And I was more interested in social sciences, politics, and government, and that kind of thing. But I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and so I took all the science.
What type of doctor?
Well, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. Was my thought. Back then, the new idea of these artificial hearts was just coming out, and University of Iowa had a big program for it, and so I thought that's what I wanted to do. But then in the end, money mattered, and so I took the best scholarship that I got, which was a free ride at a small little liberal arts college in Illinois. And it included, and what made it better than the other 4 free rides was that it included summer travel. They would give me a stipend of $6,000 a summer to be able to travel abroad, do internships, mentorships, that kind of thing, and that was a real draw. So
because what did you think you were going to do with it? It didn't matter.
Oh, politics. Oh, we mean in terms of what I was going to do in the summer?
Yes, with the travel, the fact that you could travel abroad.
Oh yeah, because I always was one of those people who felt like I could do almost anything.
Okay.
I think my parents made me feel that way.
Your brothers feel that way too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Clearly.
And it was your parents, okay.
We're all very entrepreneurial, and we've all started
That's
our own
good.
things. And,
Right.
so yeah, it was clear my parents made us feel that way, and so for me it was like, okay, well I could be biomedical engineer or I could be president. So let's go be president. So I think at the time I thought I was going to go be president, at least a senator. I thought.
Okay.
And so I went to the alma mater of Ronald Reagan. The scholarship actually that I got was in his name and was paid for by his kitchen cabinet from California, and the international travel was they were explicit during the process of selection, asking us what we thought we would do with it as part of the selection process, and they were explicit saying that they expected it to be used for learning. You've got to explain what it is you want to do. They don't want us to go to another college or school abroad and just take classes. They want us to do something of interest. And their focus really was mentorships. And so that's what I did. I did mentorships every year. 3 years.
Okay, so tell me the first, second, third.
Yeah, so the first one was with Ronald Reagan's direct mail fundraiser, who was in Washington, D.C. So I didn't go abroad that year. In fact, I only went abroad 1 year in the end because of politics. But anyway.
Was that time your first time leaving the state outside of Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, we did one vacation as children.
Okay, where?
To Colorado to see our cousins.
Right.
That was the only time we'd gone anywhere far
And how old
away.
were you then?
7, 8, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
So you were just old enough that you didn't know this wasn't going to be a continual thing.
No. Well, I was fine. We didn't know any different, and
Right.
all summer long, my dad was always busy doing a second or third job, kind of thing. And
You guys drove all the way there?
oh yeah,
Okay.
in a station wagon with a pad in the back.
Right.
Their seatbelts. What are
Was
those?
it optional? did they give you games like count the different license plates you can see?
Oh, we did all of that.
You
of
did all
course.
that and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Start with, you have to use a word that starts with a letter and then go to the next letter. and the next letter.
Right. You did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
That kind of thing. Yeah, it was good.
That's right.
Frankly, being in that, even though we didn't go far away, we would go to St. Louis, to Kansas City, to Des Moines, to Chicago.
Right.
Those were all within shooting distance with the car, and we did that a lot, probably 2-3 times a year at least, to go see a ball game, that kind of thing. My father's a big stock car race guy, and so
You guys went to the stock car races?
yeah, we went to stock car races.
So you've been watching crashes all your
Oh
life.
yeah.
You knew that was the thing we came for, to see what kind of crash you're going to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my brother, so my older brother, he ended up his whole life is sports and gears. That's his whole thing.
Is that right?
He became a Harley Davidson dealer, and he was the Yamaha, they call it YSR. It's a small kind of bike. He was the world champion for 3 years running, and yeah, he's still, he's maybe 60 this year.
That's interesting.
59 or 60.
That's interesting. Maybe because
yeah.
you're 57?
I'm 57. Yeah.
57, okay. So then you have to be 60.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 years difference, I'm just assuming.
Yeah.
So you went to D.C. to mentor the first one, of the 3.
And that was very interesting. I learned a lot.
So what did you mentor and what?
So the president of the company was my mentor, and I ended up, at first I was living with one of his employees, but he was a very socially conservative fellow, and a Wisconsin senator.
I had it confused. I thought that you were
I wasn't
going to
mentor. No, I was going to learn.
So
I
all
was
3
the
years
mentee.
you have to be mentored. Okay, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
And so he was the president of this direct mail marketing firm that had done Reagan's direct mail marketing. He was very conservative. He was a Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, and you may not have ever heard of those, but they are the most conservative version of Lutherans, and they still do, I don't think they call it a mass, but a service in German in many of their locations. And he grew up in a family that, you know, his parents spoke German, but they didn't allow their children to because they wanted them to
make sure
acclimate
yes,
after the
right.
war. Anyway, I ended up moving from the place I was staying into his own home because he felt like it was bad influences at the place that I was staying.
Did he have children?
He had 2 children at the time. Well, he still only has 2 children, but one was maybe 5 and one was maybe 3.
Okay, so they weren't any issue for you, okay.
No.
Okay.
They were fabulous, actually. They were like having little brothers and sisters, and I just was at the wedding just before the pandemic. I was at the wedding of one of them, and,
that's nice.
and yeah. But anyway, so he connected me with just a million interesting people, as you can imagine. He did all the direct fundraising for the Republican Senatorial Committee, the Republican Congressional Committee, YAF, which was the Young Americans Foundation, Young Americans for Freedom conglomerate. Just a whole bunch of super conservative approaches. My own congressman was at the time the most liberal member of the Republican House.
So you didn't have to wait to start having these divisions.
No.
You started off that way.
Yeah. So my own congressman, who I had paged for and so on, they called me the little Reaganite, and and I love him. His name is Jim Leach. He is an amazing person. He's just. It's a real shame that the Republicans have gone where they've gone and been so divisive. In fact, they saw that he lost his election by supporting the Democrat against him, and he became the first most vocal Republican to support Obama, and then became under Obama. He became the what do they call it? Maybe it's the director of the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Okay.
I think they call it the director, but anyway, it's an office head, you know.
Right. So that's the first guy.
So that was the first guy was conservative and very Reagan focused, and introduced me to all these very interesting people, but also the systems that run the political process. And so I had a really early engagement with this kind of money talks, process. More importantly, though, 2 things happened during I then was engaged with them for 4 years, of course. Every year I would spend a little bit of time with them before I go somewhere else.
You had 3 different mentors, right?
Yeah, so he was my first mentor. Right. My second mentor was in Brussels. It was the head of Caterpillar's political government relations arm.
You went to Brussels?
I went to Brussels. And I spent that summer, maybe this was 86, maybe? Yeah, I think it was 86. I spent that summer shadowing him, frankly, doing a lot of the equivalent of the ACCJ work, because he also happened to be the president or chair, whatever you call the non-employee of the chamber, right. The president of the chamber, right. And so that was very interesting. Met lots of folks who are in business side of things, but it was all focused on. His work was all focused on getting the European Commission at the time to allow U.S. products to be sanctioned to be able to move from border to border. They were trying to convince Europe itself to drop borders because they only had dropped some borders, like, for example, say Spain and Portugal dropped their borders, but France and Germany had not, or this kind of thing. And during that time, there was a great crisis for Caterpillar, because in Scotland, the plant in Glasgow had a strike, and it was famous in America at the time because the workers locked out the employers instead of the other way around.
I think I remember that, yes.
And and they just kept making tractors, and so my guy was sent from Brussels to negotiate, and he brought me with him. And that was, I don't know, maybe it was 3 weeks we were there negotiating. That was amazing.
I can imagine.
It was amazing. I just sat in the corner. I didn't get to say anything or do anything.
How did it turn out? Was he successful in his negotiation?
He was successful. He's a thoughtful Midwestern guy. He's from Minnesota, speaks 7 or 8 languages. He's a Swedish heritage originally. Maybe he's Finnish heritage originally, but spoke Swedish and Danish and French and Spanish and whatever. And he was a small guy, smaller than me, but he had just this demeanor that was disarming. And they were most upset, and the pink tractors, frankly, were a bigoted way of responding, because the guy who was the head of HR for Caterpillar UK was a gay guy.
Okay.
And,
That's they brought in the pink tractors.
Yeah, and he was old school, like chauffeur driven in his Jaguar and Rolls Royce, and came from some fancy family, blah blah blah, and so everything that these big burly Glaswegian workers were, he was exactly the opposite. And it just wasn't working. And so Don came in, and these workers are, 6'2", 6'3",
massive,
and he was like 5'7".
Right.
And he would just talk with him like, no problem. And he's from the Midwest, so there's no air about him. And he was able to calm it down and convince them to come back and open things up and have a real conversation. And it was masterful and very interesting to watch.
That's fantastic. I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah. That was very interesting.
That's good, because that's what it's all about, how we communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And I go a little bit further now that we can do it with our technology. I think it's the way that we vibrate. And you vibrate, and we can sense that. You can. I'm sure they have cameras or something that can show how people are radiated in a certain way. And I think they've done that with this color spectrum or something, showing that when you're very positive, you have this white light, and when you're not, it turns red or whatever. And I think people feel it. Animals sense each other that way, basically. And I think he had that.
I practiced yoga for years, not practicing currently, but for years I did, and they would have gatherings for pranayama and for chanting, and their whole
chakras right.
Yeah, their whole idea was that they were going to be sending these vibrations into the universe.
Right.
There
are people doing that right now, always. So your third mentor, who was that?
So my third mentor was the head of political for the Republican National Committee. They have an individual who's responsible for processing all of the potential candidates that they are bringing on board across the whole country, doing all of the polling that the RNC wants to do about those candidates to determine whether they want to support them financially or not, helps them message when they have problems. Anyway, that was a very interesting role to see played out, although I would say he wasn't a great mentor. The other two were both really good mentors.
They were good with people.
Yeah, they were good people, and they were open. They included you into their whole network and their life. But this guy, he just wanted me to be an intern rather than really be
an employee.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
He wanted me to make photocopies and get the lunch and that kind of thing, and so that wasn't as good. I ended up learning quite a lot, but it was kind of like almost a negative mentorship. It's like you learn how not to behave.
Right. So you had to take it for what it was worth.
Yeah. But I don't know exactly what happened to him because, of course, we haven't stayed in touch.
Right.
The other two I still am in touch with.
It's the yin and the yang. If you don't have that experience, it wouldn't have made the other two so good.
Yeah.
You'd have. It's nice to have three, but you need to see the differences.
Something else that was really good is that because over the years I continued to stay, especially in touch with the first mentor, because I knew their family and I was basically kind of one of their kids. I also got to see him in a very low point in his business.
Oh, I see.
They lost a whole bunch of accounts. Things were changing from old style direct mail to a kind of new style direct mail, and he wasn't really prepared for that. And when Republicans are winning, it's not really that great for Republican fundraisers. It's when the Democrats are winning that it's good for Republican fundraisers.
Of course.
And so you kind of really a product of your own success in a way.
Right.
And plus, with his success with Reagan, he then kind of doubled down on his conservative credentials, and so he wouldn't take anybody who he saw as a rhino.
Right.
And they used the word rhino back then too.
They sure did.
And so anybody who was a rhino, he would not support. And so he picked a lot of losers for the years after that. The only one that he picked that I supported as well was Jack Kemp.
Okay.
Because Jack Kemp was a really great man. But otherwise, he's picked, like his most recent one was Ben Carson. He loved Ben Carson. And I just never understood that. But anyway.
So you finished your college. Would you finish with a degree in what?
Social sciences.
Social
studies, yeah. It was like basically politics and religion and sociology mixed. They called it a divisional major. And you could create your own, envelope for that.
Right.
And so I did sociology, political science, and religion.
Did you have a job planned right after that, or did you know what you were
I went
do?
to the Justice Department. I worked for Ed Meese.
Did you immediately?
Yeah.
In D.C.?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long did you do that?
Just for 2 years. And then I had backed Jack Kemp
Okay.
for president, and of course Herbert Walker won, and so I wasn't going to be able to continue at the Justice Department, and I think I was 22 or 23 or something like that, so you're a little full of yourself.
Right.
And so I was like, I want to go to the next, for me it's the White House or State Department. There's nothing else. Nothing else exists.
Right.
And Jack was the Housing and Urban Development head, and so he offered me a job there, and I said, I'm sorry, but I can't go there.
So where'd you go?
Here. I came to Japan.
Wait. Okay, so tell me how you decided to come to Japan after that.
So my alma mater, this little Eureka College, had been asked by the head of AFLAC in Georgia to work with the head of AFLAC in Japan. I don't know if you know Otake-san. Do you remember Otake-san?
I may have. I saw him.
Anyway, he's very patrician, to come and help him open a branch campus of Eureka College with someone who they were going to introduce to. And so we came and opened a branch campus for Eureka College in collaboration.
Was it two of you?
Yeah, it was two of us.
Okay.
With a Semon Gakko, it was me and the head of my scholarship program, a guy named Phil Palin, who I just was texting with today. Actually,
But he's not here anymore, is he?
No.
He went back.
He left after 3 years. I want to say.
Okay, so he just set it up, then left.
Yeah. He had young children, and his wife didn't really like being in Japan so much, and she felt.
Is your wife
isolated.
Japanese by any chance?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah. My wife's Japanese.
You met her on that first trip that you came here?
Well, I moved here. That I wasn't on first trip. I just.
Wait,
I got off the plane. I got off the plane on April 1st of 1989, and we opened this school on like April 17th, I want to say, it was like right away. And I've been here ever since. I did that for...
Wait, so when you came with the intent that you were going to stay here?
No, I thought I was coming for 2 years.
That's what I thought, yes.
And then one of my friends who had been the patronage guy at the Justice Department, he was a lawyer.
Okay.
But Dan Quayle asked this guy to be the chief counsel for his vice president's office. And so it had just been a plan that we were going to give 2 years. The first round of political appointees would disappear.
Then you'd come back.
And then he would invite me to come and take one of these roles that I thought I deserved.
Right,
of course. and so I arrived, and he was wonderful. He sent a letter from the vice president to me here in Japan that had to be hand delivered by somebody from the embassy.
Wow.
So literally the DCM,
that's beautiful.
a guy named Bill Breer,
Yeah.
knocked on my door and said, "I have a message
from
for
the vice
you."
president.
Yeah. And so I took it
But you knew this was your appointment.
Yeah.
You just knew that you were going to be appointed.
Yeah, it was crazy, and so it was a nice letter and so on. But the real purpose, from his perspective, was just to have me connect with the people from the embassy, which it worked.
Of course.
And I was very engaged with the embassy during Mike Armacost, especially, but then since then numerous times. And in fact, I just came back from Okinawa doing the ambassador's scholarship program, choosing kids for that. But we assumed I was going to go back. And after my first year doing the branch campus, I decided I really liked Japan, and I thought I should give it a bit of time. And so he came back to me actually earlier than 2 years, probably a year and a couple months into it, and said, "Hey, there's a position that's available, and if you're interested, I could put your name in." But it wasn't quite the kind of thing I really wanted to do, and I wasn't sure I wanted to just pack up and head back for something that was kind of super junior. And so I said, "Okay, no, I think I'll pass on this one, but keep me in mind." And then the bubble fully burst. Issues with
This is 89. This is 89.
This is now 90.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And the people who were funding this activity started getting a little bit tighter, and then the Japanese government decided to sanction one of the partners who was a Semongakko. And at the time when we did this, we didn't realize that a Semongakko was not like a small university. We thought that it was something more akin to college education, but as it turns out, it's more akin to vocational type of thing.
Right, exactly.
So it wasn't a great fit, and then suddenly he didn't have any money because he had been bringing like 600 kids per year into this program from China, Korea, etc., and he only had authorization for 60. And
so they burned him in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Did they come after him?
Oh yeah, he was the poster child that year. If you went and hunted it up, Greg Gaigo Gakuin, Joseph Wong was his name.
Well, that happened with all the schools basically, and it happened with the English programs too.
Yeah.
That's why. What was the big one they had at that time? Nova, I think, went under.
Yeah, Nova.
Because they were doing the same thing. There was just the churn.
Yeah.
They had this constant churn.
Yeah. So we had to. So we needed to unfold and wind things up, and so I focused for 3 months getting all my 280 kids sent off to U.S. schools directly. As many as could be directly enrolled because they're English level. We did that. Those who couldn't, we signed special agreements. We did an agreement with.
You mean Jane? No, Beauty.
Yeah, well, Jane's
Yamano?
father.
Jane Yamano.
Mike Yamano.
Yeah, Mike Yamano.
Yeah,
That's
Mike.
So Jane Yamano.
Yeah.
He just passed. He just passed too.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So I did. I do see Jane once in a while too. But anyway, we did a deal with Mike, and he took some kids into his program, and we did some kids to a community college in Los Angeles, and we did some kids to a set of other private liberal arts colleges in Virginia and the Midwest, and so we got everybody transferred, and then in that process I started the Laurasian Institution. I started the Laurasian Institution in December 1990, December 13, 1990.
That's a good segue into what you're doing.
Yeah.
So Laurasians, why the name?
It's the hypothetical megacontinent that existed some billions of years ago. As the Earth developed land, there was something that they initially hypothesized as existing called Pangea.
Right.
This is one land mass
before it
starts to break,
right.
and then slide. And so the first break, north-south, was called Laurasia for the north, and the south was Gondwana. Gondwana. And so because the people who were involved in doing the idea were French friends, British friends, American friends, Japanese friends, we took that northern region as our kind of metaphor. Okay. The idea being that we had a shared past and we have a shared future. How do we cause ourselves to be closer?
I like that.
And so that's how we came up with the name.
Now, how did you come up with the PAX?
So PAX, actually, I did not come up with the name of. A lovely woman who started it in 1990, same year but different month, decided she needed some help. And so she had heard about me through various contacts, and she asked me if I would join her board. And so I did. After some time, this is 2009, we'd sent her some kids in 2006, 7, 8 from China. We had a big office in China at the time, and so her staff knew who I was, and she was asking around to folks who are at the State Department and others, and they said, you should contact Bradley Smith. He knows the field. He knows where things are going. He's young. I was young then. I'm not young anymore, but I was younger then.
You're still young.
And so she said, would you be willing to come and join my board? And so I did. I did that for a couple of years, and then she came back and said, would you be willing to take over? I said I would, maybe some kind of interim thing we do first, and I kind of see whether I feel like the workings are what I find appropriate. And some of those kind of organizations that are run by somebody who's done it for 40 years or whatever, it can be kind of
not what they appear to be on the outside.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So I did. It turned out to be a lovely organization with great people. And so in 2012, I took over as president of the organization. We still kept the two entities separate.
Right. But then now,
and in 2015, we merged the two together, joined our boards, and now we have one unit. We call it PAX Laurasian Exchange as the umbrella organization. Right. Laurasian Institution is the Japan-U.S. activities, and the PAX Program of Academic Exchange is the inbound program for high school students coming to the U.S. And in both cases, we have a third or more of our budget that comes from government. So on the Japan side, we do a lot of work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We do the Kake-hashi program that has been around for decades now.
Kake-hashi, which is what?
Kake-hashi program is bringing Japanese to the United States. It normally is a bilateral thing, but of course has not been working that way recently.
Okay, right.
But the idea is that you are moving from one place to the other to build a bridge of friendship.
Right.
It came out of a program that was named Kizuna, and we did that with the Japan Foundation. Japan Foundation, for various reasons, the money flowed through the Fulbright Commission, so it could be considered ODA, and then it arrived in the Japan Foundation, and the Japan Foundation shared it with us, and the Japan Foundation and Laurasian co-administered this program. And at the time, it was a huge project. We had 6,000 kids a year going back and forth, all different ages, all different grade levels. No real adult programs, primarily like went through graduate studies down to middle school kids. Now the budget is much more restricted, as you might imagine. This year we have 300 kids all going from Japan to the United States. And this is the first time they've done it for 3 years,
of course.
And it's our assumption that next year we'll get bilateral activity going again. And once we are able to do that, then we assume that the number will grow, but it probably will never grow more than, whatever, 500-600 kids, I suspect.
That's the most you think you'll get again?
Probably, yeah. Political will.
Just politically?
Yeah, so even before the pandemic occurred, they were only sending 1,000 kids back and forth.
Okay, so you can see that happening.
From 6,000 to 1,000, yeah.
The birth rate is going down, that's for sure, but that much that you'd have to half it?
No, it's not about birth rate. It's just it's just about political will.
Okay.
They don't see the direct value. I think politically right now, there's a lot of discontent in the electorate in Japan. The reason it switched from Kizuna to Kake-hashi was because when they were doing Kizuna, there were significant protests about the use of public funds for this, what they saw as a wasteful project. And so they already dropped the numbers in the third year and changed the name, and then tried to talk about it differently, in the diet. So it's a more of a political will question. On the U.S. side, we get funding from the State Department to bring kids from the former Soviet satellite countries and predominantly Muslim countries.
From the U.S. side?
Yeah, and we bring them to the U.S. though. They come to the United States, to American high school.
So you're handling that as well?
We do. Yeah, we have 75 countries now that we work with.
How many people in your organization?
For actual full-time employees. Like 42.
42. So, but worldwide, you have how many? Total? You can
that's full-time worldwide.
42.
Then we have part-time, 20-some, and then we have contractors.
Right, all over the world.
160 or something like that. Wow. Yeah.
Bradley, this has been a really engaging. We could go on and on and on. I'm sure there's so much we could talk about, and I plan on having you on again because you're traveling quite extensively anyway.
Yeah, I'm back and forth mostly every 2 weeks between New York and here. We have an office in Seattle as well, so I have to get there every so often. And because we work with all of these countries, I need to visit 7 to 10 countries a year just to kind of keep them in a cycle.
Does your wife ever travel with you?
She comes to New York a lot, but we don't travel together really so much anymore. Primarily because she's works for SoftBank. She's a hombucho for Jinji and Somu at SoftBank.
And she enjoys what she's doing, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And so she's been very busy doing that. She was a Torishimari Yaku for a while, and so she's enjoyed that. But that means that she can only take short stints out. So she comes to the United States for a long week every month. I see. And she'll come on a Thursday or a Friday, and she'll stay until a Monday or Tuesday.
She likes Manhattan.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she likes Manhattan. Although she's still not super comfortable just like going out on her own.
No, she should. Well, I'm not going to say anything, but it's a whole different place.
Yeah. So she stays pretty close to home. We have a wonderful apartment that we live in that has fantastic people living in it. We're right next to the United Nations, and there are employees from the United Nations in the building. Beautiful. There are retired folks there. And so
you're always stimulated.
There's always somebody there who's like inviting her to tea or whatever. Oh, that's nice. And of course she has to work the opposite hours, so she's up all night anyway in order to be connected with Japan. So.
Bradley, I always ask at the end of an interview this question. If you were able to go back in time with the knowledge you have now and talk to the younger Bradley, what age would you pick and what advice would you give him?
Well, there's so many opportunities along the way where I can see, right now, I can see 3 or 4 different places where I should have gone back and talked to myself. I would say the first one is, when I was in DC and I was thinking about what I'm going to do next, and I was, in my early 20s and so full of myself. There was.
You're aware of that now.
Yeah, I was, and I thought, now I think, boy, you really just should have been more relaxed, and you should have had some fun, and you should have recognized that you're not all that, But there was something called the Plum Book, and if your name was in the Plum Book, you were invited to all these parties around the city and to, big events, and you got to be at the White House regularly and so on. And since I was part of it in the Plum Book, I just thought I was pretty special. And now as I look back, I think, maybe I should have had broader horizons at the time. That is something that I think probably would have helped save, say, another decade after that, where I probably was learning that I wasn't all that, but probably still at my heart of hearts thought it. That could have all been avoided.
I want to thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Good
We're going
to
to
see
do
you
this
again.
Same
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
We're going to do
pleasure.
this again.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Thanks.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And remember, it's all on loan. So continue to reach for the stars because you're too blessed to be stressed.